As you know, a student's final AP seminar score is made up of 3 major parts: the end-of-course exam and 2 performance tasks that are done during the course. Performance Task 2 is an individual research-based essay and presentation and comprises 3 components: the individual written argument, or IWA, the individual multimedia presentation, and the oral defence, or IMP and OD. The IWA component is worth 24.5%, and the presentation and oral defence is worth 10.5% of the overall AP seminar score, a total of 35% for Performance Task 2. So let's take a quick overview of Performance Task 2. The starting point for Performance Task 2 is the packet of stimulus materials released by the College Board on or around January the 2nd each year through the digital portfolio. As the teacher, you choose when to pass these materials on to your students, and usually teachers do this after the completion of Performance Task 1. Remember, you should give them a minimum of 30 school days to do the task, and that excludes the actual time for giving their presentations. The stimulus materials are focused on a particular theme each year and represent a range of perspectives from different disciplinary domains, and you can find these listed on page 40 of the course and exam description. The class should then engage in discussions about the materials as students explore themes and ideas for potential areas of inquiry anchored in the connections they find. Students then develop their own individual research question based on a connection they have found between 2 of the stimulus materials. They conduct their own research and use that to develop their individual written argument. Once that is complete, students develop and deliver their presentations and respond to questions in the oral defence. Let's take a look in more detail at the process the students should follow as explained in the task directions on page 52 of the course and exam description. The first step is reading and analysing the stimulus materials. This can be done individually or done as a class. For example, some teachers set one of the sources for homework, then do activities to interrogate that source in class the next day, like a Socratic seminar, for example. As a teacher, you are allowed to lead discussions of the stimulus materials and discuss possible topics and perspectives. What you're not allowed to do is generate the research questions for students or provide specific evidence for them to use. Then, each individual student should come up with a preliminary research question to guide their inquiry. The research question should clearly be linked to a theme that connects 2 of the sources. The theme they find could be the most obvious theme connecting the materials, or could be something else. For example, it could be the methodology connecting 2 research studies. What is important is that someone reading the response can clearly see the link between the research question and a relevant theme clearly derived from the sources. Once they have their question, students need to conduct their own research, finding quality sources, then analyse and evaluate what they found to build their own evidence-based argument that conveys their perspective. As they conduct their research, students' questions can and probably will change over time as they discover new evidence or lack of evidence for that area of inquiry. Students should review their question to make sure the evidence they gather really helps them answer that particular question and it aligns with the argument they intend to make. It's important that evidence that is included is relevant to the question, not just interesting for that topic. The question should allow for the development of resolutions, conclusions, or solutions. The IWA also requires that students evaluate different perspectives, in other words, evaluate points of view as expressed through others' arguments, by thinking about their implications and limitations, and, based on that, propose a resolution, conclusion, or solution. Once students have been through the process, they can then compose their essay. Take a look at the first sentence describing what students have to produce. The essay should be a coherent, convincing, and well-written argument. To be coherent, it needs to be well structured with claims and evidence clearly leading to conclusion or resolution. To be convincing, it needs to evaluate different points of view and support claims with relevant evidence. And by well written, well, it should be clear and accurate, and stylistically it should be appropriate for an academic audience. Looking at the key things the students need to do in their essay, you can see that the bullet points, generally speaking, correspond to particular rows of the rubric. Students have to develop their research question based on a theme connecting 2 sources and make sure at least one source is incorporated into their argument. So, they need to make sure that their topic clearly links to the stimulus materials, but they only need to incorporate one of the stimulus sources into their actual argument. They have to connect their research question to a wider context by explaining its significance, and they have to consider different perspectives, others' points of view. An evidence-based argument should consider more than one perspective to be convincing. They need to include quality evidence to support their claims, and they need to make sure that the connection between evidence and claims is explained, and both are connected to the overall question or thesis. They need to come to a resolution, conclusion, or solution. They need to evaluate different perspectives by considering implications and limitations, and they need to attribute and cite accurately and write clearly in a style appropriate for an academic audience. A brief note about the word count. Students should be encouraged to review and edit their work to stay within the 2,000 word limit. If a student goes slightly over, that's not a problem, but readers will not read anything that goes over 10% above the word limit for scoring purposes. Before we move on, please download the 2017 stimulus materials and then briefly scan through them if you're not familiar with them already. The samples in this scoring training are all based on the 2017 stimulus materials, so you'll need to have some sense of their content in order to evaluate how well the students have connected their work to the stimulus materials.